There's a pain that cuts deeper than the sharpest knife. It's not the pain from a stranger. No. It's the pain that comes from someone you once trusted. Someone you let into your heart. Someone who smiled in your face, but behind that smile was a blade. They didn't just hurt you by accident. They planned it, calculated it. They damaged you intentionally. That's not love. That's not misunderstanding. That is hate in its most silent and dangerous form. You ever been there? You ever looked into someone's eyes and realized they knew exactly what they were doing? That betrayal you felt wasn't confusion. It was confirmation. Confirmation that they never cared. That behind their "I love you" was a hidden "I'll break you" when you least expect it. Let me tell you something. When a person goes out of their way to destroy your peace, your name, your joy, your purpose, that's not a mistake. That's an attack. And it means they saw your light and hated it. They saw your strength and wanted to dismantle it. But here's what they didn't know. You were built to survive storms like this, and you will rise stronger, sharper, and smarter. They didn't start by shouting or pointing fingers. No, that would have been too obvious. They started gently, casually, like it was for your good. They told you certain people didn't care about you, that some friends were fake, that your family was too toxic for you to be around. And because you trusted them, you listened, you believed that maybe, just maybe, they saw something you didn't. But slowly, without realizing it, your circle got smaller. The calls you used to make, you stopped. The visits you used to enjoy, you canceled. The people who poured into your soul, they were labeled as distractions. And the more you let them talk, the quieter your world became, until one day you looked around and realized it's just them, no one else. And that's exactly because isolation is not always a cage with bars. It's a quiet separation from everything that reminds you of who you are. The more they pulled you away from the people who knew you, the easier it became for them to reshape your reality. They made themselves your only voice, your only opinion, your only approval. And in doing so, they positioned themselves as your God. If you needed validation, it had to come from them. If you wanted advice, you had to ask them. They created a system where you depended on their voice more than your own intuition. And that's not protection. That's possession. They didn't want to love you. They wanted to own you. They didn't want to grow with you. They wanted to weaken you enough so they could feel bigger in your life. At first, it feels like love. That's the hardest part, because they check in often. They ask where you're going, who you're with. And on the surface, it seems like they care. But look closer. There's no trust in their questions. It's not concern, it's control dressed up as concern. The moment you start setting boundaries, they take it personally. The second you try to reconnect with someone you care about, they spin the narrative. Why do you need them when you have me? I'm the only one who's ever been there for you. That language isn't rooted in love, it's rooted in fear. Their fear that someone might wake you up and remind you of your strength. Because the stronger you become, the less power they have. So they make sure you never fully remember who you were before they came along. You start to notice that you're doubting yourself more. That voice you once had, the one that stood tall, the one that dreamed big, the one that knew what it deserved, it's fading. And in its place, there's hesitation. There's self-blame. There's that haunting question. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too much, too emotional, too broken. They planted those seeds. Every time they joke about your flaws, every time they made you feel like your past made you unworthy, they were tightening the grip. They needed you to feel uncertain so that they could feel secure. Your self-doubt was their comfort. Your silence was their victory. And the worst part, you didn't see it. Because you were too busy trying to please someone who never intended to let you grow. When they isolate you, they don't just pull you away from people, they pull you away from perspective. You no longer see things clearly. You start to accept behavior that once would have sent you running. The red flags become the norm. The disrespect gets excused. They're just going through something. They didn't mean it. But deep down, there's a gut feeling you've been ignoring. That whisper in your soul that says, this ain't right. You used to trust that voice, now you barely hear it. That's what isolation does. It doesn't just trap your body. It locks your spirit in a cage. And the key? They keep it in their pocket, reminding you that you need them for everything, including freedom. That's not love. That's a prison with soft pillows. And anytime you try to reach for freedom, even in small ways, they retaliate. Suddenly they're cold. They're distant. They make you feel guilty for wanting space. They say you're changing, like it's a crime. They twist the narrative and say you become ungrateful. They remind you of everything they've done for you, every favor, every sacrifice, every moment they claimed they were the only one there. But real love doesn't keep score. Real love doesn't punish you for growing. If someone's love comes with strings, conditions, guilt trips, then it was never love. It was leverage. It was control. And they use your loneliness like currency. They bet on the fact that you have no one else. And even if you do, they've poisoned your mind enough to make you believe you don't. What's most dangerous about isolation is how slow and subtle it is. You don't wake up one day suddenly trapped. It happens in inches. One small compromise here, one overlooked red flag there. Before you know it, you're deep in a web of emotional manipulation, wondering how you got here. And here's the thing. They knew what they were doing. They counted on you not noticing. They studied your insecurities. They figured out your soft spots. And instead of protecting them, they exploited them. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate. Because people who want to damage you don't always use fists. Sometimes they use silence. They use distance. They use isolation. They remove your world until they are the only piece of it that remains. And then they smile because they think they've won. But the fact that you're even questioning this now, that's the beginning of something powerful. The moment you start noticing the patterns, the manipulation, the control, that's the start of your return. It means your spirit is waking up. That small, quiet voice inside of you is fighting to be heard again. And you may not feel strong right now. You may feel broken, confused, scared to be alone. But let me tell you this, there is a version of you waiting on the other side of this pain. A version of you that remembers how to stand tall, that remembers what it's like to breathe freely. That version isn't gone. It's just been buried under the lies they told you. But you're still in there. And they will regret ever thinking they could silence a soul like yours. They didn't come at you with harsh words, not at first. They didn't scream that you were nothing or that you weren't good enough. No, they knew how to play the game. They knew if they said it too directly, you'd see them for who they really were. So instead, they whispered the doubt in small doses. Quiet enough that it didn't feel like an attack, more like advice, more like constructive criticism. They wrapped their poison in smiles and called it just being honest. And the worst part, you started to believe them. You started questioning your own value, not because of what they said loudly, but because of what they said softly. Over time, you didn't need them to make you feel small. You started doing it to yourself. They made it a habit to question everything you did. If you were proud of something, they'd say, it's not that big of a deal. If you were excited about an idea, they'd reply, that's been done before. If you wore something you loved, they'd offer a backhanded compliment. That's bold. I wouldn't wear it, but it's you. One drop of doubt at a time. That's how they worked. They didn't destroy your self-worth all at once. They eroded it, like water slowly carving through stone. You didn't even notice it was happening. You just woke up one day and didn't recognize yourself. Your fire dimmed, your voice softened, your opinions got quieter, and every time you looked in the mirror, you saw less of the person you once were and more of the version they wanted you to be. Smaller, quieter, easier to control. And every time you did speak up for yourself, every time you did shine a little too bright, they made sure to dim that light. They'd roll their eyes, change the subject, or hit you with, you're so full of yourself lately. And because you're kind, because you care about others, you pulled yourself back. You doubted your own confidence. You thought maybe you were too much. But you weren't too much. You were just too powerful for someone who wanted to keep you small. They couldn't stand your growth because it reminded them of their stagnation. Your courage threatened their control. Your confidence made their own insecurities rise. So instead of cheering for you, they chipped at you. They called it honesty, but it was insecurity disguised as concern. What they did wasn't loud, and that's what made it dangerous. You didn't have proof. No bruises, no scars, just 1,000 little comments that slowly convinced you you weren't enough. You started shrinking yourself in rooms where you used to walk tall. You started saying sorry for things that weren't even wrong. You stopped dreaming big because they made it seem like your dreams were unrealistic. And you told yourself it's not abuse because they never yelled. But emotional damage doesn't need to be loud to be real. Some of the deepest wounds are invisible. And the worst betrayal is when someone who claims to love you is the very one dismantling you brick by brick, while still calling it love. The truth is, they needed you to question your worth so that you would never outgrow them. They knew that if you ever saw yourself clearly, they'd lose their power. They knew that your light, once fully awakened, would make their shade impossible to hide in. So they tried to plant self-doubt in your mind. They tried to blur your reflection so that you would never see your full beauty, your full strength, your full potential. And every time you succeeded despite them, it made them uncomfortable. Because deep down, they never wanted you to rise. They wanted you to stay beneath them, where they could feel bigger by comparison. And you gave so much grace. You gave so many second chances. You told yourself they were just going through something. You excused the comments. You believed they didn't mean it. But your spirit knew. It flinched at the sound of their voice. It tensed around their energy. It felt the shift every time you tried to be proud of yourself and they shot it down. That's not love. That's not support. That's sabotage, dressed up as closeness. And when you tried to explain it, when you tried to bring it up, they flipped it on you. You're too sensitive. You're reading into things. You always make it about you. They didn't just undermine your worth, they made you feel guilty for even noticing it. And it worked for a while, didn't it? You stopped shining the way you used to. You questioned your own greatness. You lowered your standards just to keep the peace. You accepted less than you deserved because they convinced you that asking for more was selfish. But here's what they never expected. You were watching. Even if you didn't speak up right away, even if you didn't call them out, your soul was taking notes. And eventually that soul woke up. Eventually the cracks in their mask became too clear to ignore. And now you're beginning to remember who you were before they tried to rewrite you. And that scares them more than anything, because they never thought you'd see through it. So here you are, waking up to the truth, feeling the pain, yes, but also feeling the power. Because once you recognize the subtle ways someone's been tearing you down, you take that power back. You start to hear your own voice again. You start to believe in your own worth again. And though it hurts, because betrayal always does, it also frees you. You finally understand that real love celebrates you, uplifts you, honors you. It never minimizes you. It never makes you question your value. It never uses guilt as a leash. And now every step you take toward healing, every time you speak life back into yourself, every time you stand tall in your truth, they lose the grip they had on you. You become untouchable. Because someone who has remembered their worth is someone no manipulator can ever break again. They didn't betray you in front of a crowd. They were too clever for that. No, they waited until the door was closed, until the phones were down, until the world was quiet. That's when the betrayal came. Soft at first, then sharp. It wasn't always shouting. Sometimes it was silence. Sometimes it was abandonment. Sometimes it was a look that cut deeper than any words ever could. They made promises in private that they never intended to keep. They gave you their word, then broke it behind your back. But when the spotlight hit, when people were watching, they put on the performance of a lifetime. Suddenly, they were the victim. Suddenly, they were the caring friend, the supportive partner, the innocent one. And you were left choking on your own truth, unsure how to explain the war happening behind closed doors when all the world saw was their smile. They painted you as difficult, over-emotional, dramatic, while they stood in the center of the room with a calm face and a steady voice, acting like they had no idea why you were so upset. They twisted the narrative, carefully choosing their words to make it seem like they were just trying to help, just trying to love you the best they could. And you started to feel crazy, because how do you explain betrayal that happens in shadows? How do you prove pain that's been dressed up in politeness? You knew the truth, but every time you tried to tell it, they made you doubt your own memory. They smiled at the people who didn't know the version of them that you knew. And the most painful part, no one else could see it. No one else saw the mask slip. Behind the scenes, they would do things that tore at your spirit. They'd withhold support when you needed it most. They'd disappear during your storms and show up only when it made them look good. They'd criticize you in private, then compliment you in public like nothing happened. That's the kind of betrayal that cuts deep, not just because of what they did, but because of how they tried to bury it. They wanted to break you without leaving fingerprints. They wanted to hurt you and still walk away clean, and they almost did because you were loyal, because you loved them, because you wanted to believe in the good. You gave them every benefit of the doubt. You covered for them. You stayed silent out of love, and they used your silence as a weapon. They made you carry the weight of their sins while they danced in their innocence. They let you walk into rooms where everyone had only heard one side of the story, their side. And when you didn't defend yourself, they took your silence as permission to keep doing it. They knew you were hurting. They knew what they did, but they were more interested in protecting their image than repairing your heart. They cared more about appearances than accountability. They wanted to be liked, not honest. And every time someone praised them, every time someone said how amazing they were, it felt like a punch to your gut, because you weren't just dealing with betrayal. You were dealing with the world clapping for the person who stabbed you. And even then you kept trying. You kept showing up. You kept hoping they'd change. You thought maybe if you loved harder, gave more, stayed longer, they'd finally see what they were doing. But they didn't want to see it, because accountability wasn't their goal. Control was. They wanted you loyal and confused. They wanted you broken but present. They didn't want a real relationship. They wanted a mirror, someone who reflected back the image they were trying to sell to the world. And when you stopped reflecting that, when you started asking questions, when you started demanding honesty, they labeled you the problem, not because you were wrong, but because the truth you carried was too dangerous to their performance. They betrayed you when no one was watching and then played the victim when you reacted. That's what they do. They provoke behind the scenes and then cry in public. They make you look like the villain for simply telling the truth. They weaponize your honesty. And if you push back even once, suddenly you're unstable. You're angry. You're difficult. They pretend to be shocked by your pain as if they weren't the ones who caused it. And the more composed you are, the more they push, because they want you to snap. They want you to react. They want something they can point to and say, see, look what I had to deal with. It's psychological warfare, and it's soul crushing when the people around you believe them. You were loyal to a fault. You believed the best in them, even when they were showing you the worst. You gave them time, patience, love, all the things they never returned. You gave them a private version of yourself that was raw and real, and they used that vulnerability as ammunition. Then they stood in public pretending to be the one who was hurt. It's betrayal at the deepest level, because it's not just what they did, it's how they convinced the world you were the one to blame. It's how they turned your pain into a performance. It's how they made your suffering invisible. But no matter how quiet the truth is, it is still the truth. And one day, the mask will crack, because no lie lasts forever. Now you know, you've seen behind the curtain. You felt the sting of being betrayed by someone who swore they loved you. And even though it broke something in you, it also woke something up. You're starting to reclaim your voice. You're starting to see that your silence served them, not you. You're starting to understand that real love doesn't hide behind smiles and false innocence. Real love owns up. It apologizes. It changes. And while they may keep pretending, while they may keep their mask on a little longer, their act is not your responsibility. You are no longer required to protect the reputation of the person who damaged your heart. Your healing matters more than their performance. Your truth deserves to be free. And now, finally, it will be. They didn't come at you with a knife. No, they came with smiles, with soft words, with support that never really reached your heart. They clapped for you in public, but behind the scenes, they were pulling strings to make sure you didn't go too far. They acted like they were proud, like they were cheering you on, but their actions never matched their words. Every time you tried to rise, they found a way to cast a shadow. Every time you felt momentum, they whispered doubt. They didn't scream their sabotage. They whispered it gently so it wouldn't look like sabotage at all. It looked like concern, like advice, like love. But what they were really doing was planting seeds of hesitation in your mind, hoping you'd never bloom past the box they built for you. You see, they couldn't handle the idea of you shining without them. They needed you to stay small so they could feel big. Your growth threatened their comfort. Your potential exposed their stagnation. So they sabotaged you quietly. They questioned your ideas in private, made little comments that lingered in your mind. Are you sure that's the right move? You don't want to set yourself up for disappointment. Maybe you're not ready yet. They never told you not to dream. They just made your dreams feel a little too far, a little too much, a little too dangerous. And you started to second guess yourself, not even realizing that the doubt wasn't yours. It was theirs, projected onto you like a silent curse. They smiled when you talked about your goals, but their energy changed when those goals started becoming real. Suddenly, they stopped answering your calls as often. They weren't available to help like before. And if they were, it came with passive-aggressive remarks or distractions or subtle guilt tripping. They made your success feel like betrayal, like you were leaving them behind, even though you always tried to bring them with you. But they didn't want to come with you. They wanted to keep you where they were. Reachable, manageable, controllable. Because your elevation meant they'd have to look at their own lack of movement. And that was something they weren't ready for. So instead, they became the silent architect of your setbacks. When you got close to breakthroughs, they brought up your failures. When you made progress, they reminded you of your past. They always found a way to dim the light just enough so you'd start questioning if it was shining at all. They made themselves look like your grounding force, like they were keeping you realistic, but what they were really doing was keeping you afraid. And the worst part, you didn't even see it for what it was at first, because they didn't act like enemies. They acted like friends, like lovers, like mentors. And that's what made it so destructive, because the sabotage came wrapped in trust. And trust is what made it work. You started shrinking your vision to keep them comfortable. You started editing your success to avoid their judgment. You started pretending you weren't as driven, as talented, as capable, as if hiding your light would save the relationship. But it never did. It only made you resent yourself. Because deep down, you knew you were playing small. You knew there was more inside you. But you kept hearing their voice in your head every time you got close to taking a leap. They conditioned you to fear your own power. And the longer you stayed in that environment, the more you started to believe that maybe they were right. Maybe you weren't ready. Maybe you'd fail. But that was never your voice. It was theirs, echoing inside you like a ghost. Even your wins became uncomfortable. You downplay them just to avoid their distance. You changed the subject to keep the peace. They never celebrated you like they should have. They never amplified your success. They tolerated it barely. And when you needed encouragement the most, they were nowhere to be found. They sabotaged you, not just through their words or actions, but through their absence. They refused to support you in the moments that mattered most. And that silence, oh, that silence spoke volumes. It told you exactly how they felt. It told you that your success didn't serve them. So it didn't matter. And that realization, that cold truth, stung in a way you weren't ready for. But now you see it. You see how they moved. You see how they dressed their envy as care, how they masked their fear as advice. And you're done carrying their insecurities like they're your own. You're done dimming your light to fit into their shadow, because your success is not selfish. Your growth is not betrayal. You were never wrong for wanting more. They were just wrong for trying to make you feel guilty about it. And if someone truly loves you, they won't fear your wings. They'll help you fly. So let them stay where they are if they choose. But you were born to rise. Quiet sabotage or not, you're rising anyway. You don't owe them an apology for outgrowing the limits they set for you. You don't owe them your silence so they can stay comfortable. You owe yourself the truth that they tried to keep hidden beneath smiles and small talk, the truth that they were never in your corner the way they pretended to be. And yes, that truth hurts. It hurts to know that the people you trusted were the ones slowing you down. But now you're free. Free from their quiet sabotage. Free from their quiet doubt. Free from the invisible chains they wrapped around your potential. And you won't shrink anymore. You won't apologize for dreaming, for growing, for becoming. You're stepping into everything they were afraid of, and you're doing it without their permission. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't need to. They rewrote the story right in front of your eyes, softly, steadily, like a slow erasure of everything you knew to be true. One moment you were standing in certainty, the next you were drowning in confusion. They made you question not just what happened, but who you are. They made you doubt your instincts, second guess your emotions, and apologize for things you never did. And the worst part? They did it with calm faces, gentle tones, and eyes full of false concern. That's how gaslighting works. It doesn't break you all at once. It chips away at you piece by piece until you can't tell what's real anymore. And when you react, when you get angry or sad or defensive, they tell you you're too sensitive, too emotional, overreacting. You start to wonder, am I crazy? Am I the problem? But deep down, something still whispers, you know you're not. You used to trust your gut. You used to speak with clarity, walk with confidence, but over time they infected your mind with doubt. They made you feel like your truth was a lie, like your memory was flawed, like your perception couldn't be trusted. You could catch them red-handed and they'd look you in the eye and say it never happened, and somehow their denial was so convincing that you'd start believing it. You'd question your own eyes, your own words, your own pain. They'd twist situations just enough to make you look like the aggressor and them like the victim. They'd shift blame, deflect accountability, and leave you tangled in your own confusion. That's the cruel genius of gaslighting. It doesn't need to change the facts. It just needs to change your belief in them. And once it does that, it owns you. They knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't clumsy communication. It was calculated manipulation. They needed control, and control doesn't always come through force. Sometimes it comes through deception, through repeated denial, through emotional distortion. They took your voice and buried it under their version of events. They'd say things like, I never said that, or you always twist my words, or you're imagining things, over and over until you stopped trusting yourself. And once they broke that inner compass, they could guide you wherever they wanted. They convinced you that you were the problem, that you were hard to love, that you were unstable. So you stopped asking for what you needed. You stopped expressing your truth. You became a shell of who you were, silent, unsure, walking on eggshells, just to keep the peace. And even when you tried to bring up the hurt, they'd flip it back on you. Suddenly you were the toxic one. You were the dramatic one. They'd act so calm while you cried. They'd look so rational while you spiraled. They made your reactions the issue, not their behavior. So you started suppressing everything. You swallowed your pain. You buried your anger. You numbed your own truth. You tried to be easier to love, to be less emotional, to be what they needed, while they kept erasing who you really were. That's what gaslighting steals from you, not just your peace, but your identity. It makes you forget the sound of your own voice. It makes you feel like a stranger to yourself. And that pain, it runs deeper than anything visible. It eats away at your soul. They weaponized your empathy. They knew you'd try to understand them, knew you'd give them the benefit of the doubt, so they used your compassion against you. They told half-truths. They left out details. They shaped reality just enough so it always favored them, and every time you got closer to clarity, they'd hit you with another wave of confusion. They'd change the narrative, change the subject, or change their mood entirely. Suddenly you were apologizing again, for feeling hurt, for asking questions, for seeking the truth. That's the exhausting loop they trap you in. You chase validation while they keep moving the finish line. You try to find solid ground while they turn everything beneath you into quicksand. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already knee-deep in self-doubt. But here's the truth. You were never crazy. You were never too sensitive. You were reacting to a reality that was being twisted in real time. You were surviving a psychological war designed to break your mind while making it look like love. They wanted control, not connection. They didn't want mutual respect. They wanted dominance dressed as concern. But now you see it. You see the pattern, the manipulation, the fake apologies, the carefully curated confusion. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. That clarity is painful, but it's also powerful because it means you're waking up. You're reclaiming your voice. You're remembering what's real again. You've been through enough. You've questioned yourself long enough. Now it's time to believe in your own mind again, to honor your memory, your perception, your intuition. The truth doesn't have to be debated, it just has to be owned. And your truth, it matters. What you experienced was real, what you felt was valid, and no amount of manipulation can erase that. You are not broken. You are not unstable. You are gaslighted, yes. But you're not staying in that fog. You are walking out of it. One breath, one truth, one boundary at a time. You are not who they tried to make you believe you were. You are stronger. You are wiser. And you are done being anyone's illusion. Because the moment you trust yourself again, everything changes. The spell breaks, the fog lifts, and the power they stole begins to return to you. They might try to twist it again. They might try to make you doubt. But this time you know better. This time you're anchored in truth. You've walked through confusion and come out with clarity. You've been made to question your reality. But now you own it fully, boldly, without apology. You don't need their approval. You don't need their permission. You don't even need closure. Because the moment you realized they were gaslighting you, that was the closure. Now go forward, not as someone they broke, but as someone who broke free. They didn't expect you to make it out. They didn't expect you to rise. They thought the damage they caused would be permanent, that the silence they left you in would be enough to drown you. They were counting on your breakdown. They were counting on you falling apart and never putting the pieces back together. They smiled while they shattered you, and they walked away like they never even touched you. But what they underestimated, what they never saw coming, was your resilience. You didn't just survive. You crawled out of the fire with nothing but your heartbeat and your soul, and you still stood. And that kills them. Because your survival is proof that their cruelty wasn't the final chapter. You surviving them is the loudest rebellion you could have ever made. And they hate it. Deep down, it burns them because your strength exposes their weakness. They had power over your emotions, and they used it like a weapon. They wanted to see you broken, begging, dependent on their approval to feel whole. And when you started to heal, when you started building yourself without needing their validation, it scared them. Because now you are no longer under their control. You started talking differently. You started walking with peace. You began to glow with the kind of light they never wanted you to discover. And every time they see you, hear about you, or even think of you, they're reminded of a simple fact. They lost. They had you in the palm of their hand. They could have loved you, could have cherished you. But instead, they chose to tear you down. And you chose to rise anyway. That's the kind of survival that makes people uncomfortable. The kind where you not only recover, but thrive. See, they didn't hate you because you were weak. They hated you because you were strong enough to leave, strong enough to see the truth, strong enough to protect your peace, even if it meant being alone for a while. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your patience for naivety. But when you stopped making excuses for their behavior, when you stopped tolerating the bare minimum, when you started loving yourself the way they never could, something in them cracked. Because they realized they were no longer the center of your world. They were no longer the voice inside your head. And the image they tried to leave you with of being unworthy, broken, too much to love, completely shattered. They hated that. They hated that you started seeing yourself clearly again. You began to breathe without asking permission. You smiled without needing their attention. You made progress in silence. You built peace they can't touch. And that peace, it irritates their spirit. Because now they can't reach you. Their manipulations don't work anymore. Their guilt trips fall flat. You no longer shrink yourself to fit inside the small version of you they tried to control. You became unrecognizable to them, not because you changed into someone else, but because you returned to who you were before they broke you. And every step you take away from that pain, every healing moment, every laugh, every bit of joy, you're reclaiming power they thought they stole for good. What they did was intentional. Don't let that confusion fool you. They knew the damage they were causing. They knew how deep the cuts would go. And they watched you bleed while they pretended to care. But now, Now you don't bleed the same. Now those wounds have become scars, and those scars have become stories, and those stories have made you wise. You no longer live in the place where they left you. Those stories have made you wise. You no longer live in the place where they left you. You no longer search for closure from someone who made a home in your suffering. You gave yourself closure. You gave yourself healing. You gave yourself love. And nothing bothers a person who tried to destroy you more than watching you rebuild what they tried to burn. They hate that they no longer define you. That when people speak your name, they don't think of the pain, they think of your strength. They think of your comeback. They think of how you got up, kept going, and refused to let bitterness win. That's what makes them restless. Because you could have mirrored their cruelty, but you chose peace. You could have taken revenge, but you chose growth. You didn't become them, you rose above them. You took every insult, every betrayal, every tear, and turned it into fuel. That's power they'll never understand. That's resilience they'll never taste. That's why they hate your survival, because it proves their effort to destroy you failed. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them softness. You don't owe them another version of yourself that hides your truth just to make them comfortable. Speak it. Own it. Your story is valid. Your pain is real. And your healing is holy. You don't have to apologize for becoming harder to manipulate. You don't have to feel guilty for protecting your peace. You don't have to carry the shame they tried to place on your shoulders. That was never yours to begin with. You have every right to survive out loud, to be proud of the way you overcame, to love the new version of yourself that came out of that darkness, more powerful than ever. Because the truth is, your survival was never a coincidence. It was divine, it was written, it was earned. Through nights of crying alone, through days of pretending to be okay, through battles no one ever saw. You survived because there's something greater inside you, something they couldn't break, something they couldn't understand, and now they see it. And they hate that it still burns. But let them hate, because your light isn't up for debate. Your survival is your testimony, and no one can take that away from you. You've heard the stories, how they isolated you, making you feel alone and trapped, how they subtly chipped away at your worth until you doubted yourself, how they betrayed you in silence, only to wear innocence like a mask in public, how they sabotaged your success quietly, hoping you'd never rise, how they gaslighted you, twisting your reality until you questioned everything you knew, and finally how they hated with every fiber of their being that you survived their attempts to break you. So these are not just words or empty accusations. These are wounds that run deep, battles fought in the shadows of broken trust and shattered hearts. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. None of their actions define you. Their attempts to control, diminish, betray, sabotage, confuse, or destroy you were born out of their own fears, insecurities, and brokenness, not your failures. They sought power over your mind and spirit because they knew the strength you carried inside. When they isolated you, it was because they feared your voice would rise louder than their silence. When they undermined your worth, it was because they couldn't bear the thought of you shining brighter than their shadow. When they betrayed you, it was because loyalty and integrity threatened their fragile control. When they sabotaged your success, it was because your growth made their stagnation unbearable. When they gaslighted you, it was because your truth unsettled their lies. And when they hated your survival, it was because your resilience exposed their cruelty. You have lived through storms that tried to tear you apart, and yet here you stand, still breathing, still fighting, still reclaiming your power. Survival is not a quiet surrender. It is a loud declaration that your spirit is unbreakable. You didn't just make it through. You rose beyond what they thought possible. And that rise, that victory is yours to own. The pain they caused doesn't have to be your prison. Instead, it can be the fuel that propels you forward. Every scar, every tear, every broken piece you've put back together carries the story of your strength. You are not the sum of their hatred or their damage. You are the sum of your courage, your healing, and your unshakable will to move forward. You might still carry the weight of what happened. Sometimes the shadows creep back in and remind you of the pain. That's natural. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, it's slow, and it asks for patience with yourself. But remember this, your value was never determined by how they treated you. Your worth is inherent and unchanging. You deserve kindness, respect, and love, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And the most important love you can give is the love you give yourself. Protect your peace fiercely. Guard your heart carefully. Set boundaries that honor your healing and your growth. You owe no one access to your soul who has proven they do not cherish it. The power to rebuild lies in your hands. No one else can write your story. No one else can define your identity. This moment, right here, right now, is your turning point. The day you stop living under the shadow of their hatred and step fully into your own light. You have already begun this journey by recognizing the damage and refusing to be defined by it. Now move forward with intentionality. Surround yourself with people who see your worth and celebrate your growth. Pursue your dreams without apology. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Your survival is a testament to your spirit's resilience and your heart's capacity to heal. Let your story be a beacon for those still trapped in darkness. Let your strength inspire others to break free from the chains of manipulation, betrayal, and pain. You are proof that no matter how deeply someone tries to wound you, your spirit can rise, your light can shine, and your life can be beautiful again. Your journey from pain to power is a living message that hatred and cruelty are no match for resilience and love. So as you stand here now, wounded but unbowed, remember who you are. You are not broken. You are not defined by the damage done to you. You are a warrior, a survivor, a soul reborn. And with every step you take, you're reclaiming not just your life, but your dignity, your joy, and your peace. No matter what they wanted, you survived. And that survival is your victory. Thank you for listening. May you walk forward with strength and grace. May your heart find peace and your spirit soar. God bless you.